How should you and when should you start to scale your brand globally? It's a very individual question simply because it depends on your business's infrastructure, how much you can sustain in terms of scale, what is your shipping looking like, all of those different things. So it is very individual, but I'll give you a rough framework that we use for our clients to scale them globally and kind of the two ways that we usually go about it. So I'll walk you through those right now. And as I said, it depends on your whole setup and how everything is looking, but these things you can apply regardless of what your setup is. If you decide to go globally, this is something you can apply regardless of what your infrastructure look like, what your backend is, structured like. You can use this. So that's why it's super good. And that's why we've, created it, simply because we can just, put it into every single one of our clients and really sustain and scale to that global level. So as always, if you have any questions after watching this video or just going through it, shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'll be happy to answer any questions and help you move forward from that, breakpoint. Shoot me a DM. We do this for our clients every single day, so I can definitely answer any questions you have. So with that being straight into it. So the first thing you'll notice here is that I've written local to global. The reason for this is that sometimes for some clients it's really valuable to start locally. Now the reason for this is that starting in your local market allows you to really not only find your ideal customer, but also test and find out what works on that market. Because once you've tested one market, it's usually cheaper because advertising costs are cheap on a global or more expensive on a global basis compared to just a local basis. So that's one thing. It allows you to test one market, figure out what works. And the way you do that is obviously test ads, audiences, strategies, content creatives, platforms, copy, etc. Now, one other benefit from this is that if you're local and you're doing the ads yourself, you know something about your country that other people don't. So if you go into, let's say that you're from Finland and you want to advertise in Finland, you obviously, if you're from Finland, you know things about that culture and those people that, someone from, as I am from Denmark, would know about Finland. So it gives you an advantage, right? So targeting to people, and you can use, ads, audiences, copies, strategies, and you can use angles that appeals to that specific culture because you know it. So that's one thing. Obviously, we can't know that for every single one of our clients, because if I have a client in Spain, I don't know Spanish culture that well, right? But that's how we work with our clients. We get the insights, we do the market research, all of those different things to gather those insights if we decide to go about scaling and getting them locally first. So that's one thing. If you're running the ads yourself, you have you have your kind of an edge about that specific country and about that specific location, which allows you to test all of these things at that more, compromised level, right? So that's the things right here: ads, audiences, strategies, content creatives, platforms, copy, etc. You can test all of these things on your local market. Now, what you also can do is find your ideal customer in that market. So how do you do that? You use wording, you figure out what age, what words they appeal to, what age they are, what gender they are, what interests they have, problems, stuff, etc. So you get to, do research in all of these different things and kind of structure your creatives around that and appeal to that audience. Because not only can you test the things that I just showed you on the right before with the ads, etc. But you obviously need the content of those ads, right? And you figure out that by testing these things, by defining your ideal customer, your customer persona, and then you just boil it down to a specific, specific small text, so you have everything in one place, and then you can just go ahead and put it into your ads. So that's the really good thing. And as I said, as you know more about that specific location and that specific area, you can do this more easily. Whereas if you were going into a brand new country, it would take some more time to research these things compared to if it's your local market. So that's the two things that are really beneficial for starting locally. Now, the thing with this is that once you've defined these things, you can scale to 20K to 50K a month pretty easily, right? We did this for a client in the US market. So we took them to, to 20 to 50K a month on the US market only by, doing these two steps that I just showed you and then just scaling on that market. Now the US market is big, so it's a bit more broad right there, but as you can see right here, from 23rd of September all the way to, around now, 20 September, we're doing around 90K, or we've done around 92K, right? So one month, I think we did around, I think in October we did around 50K, and then you see it was a bit slower and then a bit up. So you can see, and then obviously around here, around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we had a bit of spike, and then right now. So it's very, up and down, but nonetheless, we scale them to 20 to 50K a month on the US market only by defining these things. Now, what we want to do now that we have actually gotten some proof of content, that we know what is going on in the US market and what performs, what our customer is, what our ads, what ads are performing well, etc., etc. And we have all of that data, we can then duplicate the same strategy to the global market, plus add new platforms. So if we are not already using ad platforms, or let's say that we're using two ad platforms, on the US market only, let's say Google and Meta, we can now duplicate that same framework and use it for Snapchat, TikTok, Pinterest, all of those different things, right? Obviously not Google, you can't duplicate Google strategies to TikTok, but you get the point, right? We can duplicate the same framework and put in multiple platforms, which allows us to scale quicker because we get more data for cheap. Now, the way that I would go about this, especially if you're selling, let's say, to a audience that is between like 15 years of age all the way up to like 35. That is the first step, right? If you're 15 to 35, you should start with Snapchat. If you're not in between 15 to 35, you should definitely more so start with TikTok and then just move along to the right here as I'll go through. But if your audience is in that group, start with Snapchat. Now, the reason for this is that we can use it for best performing videos from the local market. So what we do is that the videos that we've been testing on the local market, we literally just take them from Meta. Let's say that we've been running, Meta ads on the local market and we've seen some of these doing well. We just take them from Meta, put them into Snapchat, and then we launch them in the locations that we want to test on the new markets. And the reason that we actually can nearly guarantee that this will perform is that we already know that it performs on one location on one platform. And usually what performs on Meta videos will perform on Snapchat. What performs on Snapchat will perform on TikTok, right? So that's the thing. We can literally just replicate it, put it onto Snapchat, and the reason that Snapchat is so good is because the CPMs are very low. Same with TikTok and Pinterest, but also with Snapchat. We can get a lot of traffic for cheap, jump into new markets, get all of that traffic, start to, pick up on some website events and some data and start to process that. From here, I'd suggest you implement TikTok with Spark ads. We do this for our clients as well. This is the exact framework we use. Use the same creatives as on Snapchat. So the well-performing creatives that you've seen on Snapchat, that you also see did well on Meta, put them onto TikTok, and then launch Spark ads on TikTok in those new countries, in those new markets. Now, obviously, we can go into all of this with grouping locations. How should you structure your locations? Where should you put? How many ad sets should you run? Should you have a campaign per location? I can into this a bit further down, but obviously that's for another video. So as I said, upload those creatives to TikTok, use Spark ads, and do the same framework. Tap into new markets for cheap with low CPMs. A very, very specific, a very not specific audience, but a audience that is, I would say here for TikTok, I would say like 15 all the way up to 40, 45, even 50, right? That's a pretty broad audience. And a lot of people, if you haven't watched my Frankie Shop video, go ahead and watch that and you'll get surprised how many, bigger brands who are selling to older audiences are actually big on TikTok and using it a lot. So that's number 2. Go into TikTok and implement Spark ads. Then you use Google ads for shopping, ranking, and search engine listing. That is a must-have. Google ads on an international basis may be a bit harder for you to think, oh, how should I do that, etc. So it is a bit more complicated. Google ads is slightly harder to set up than all of these other platforms simply because there's, more work to do, etc., etc. But, all in all, it isn't too hard. But it is a bit harder than others, but you need to have Google ads, right? Because people that are, already ready to buy and, that are searching for your specific product, etc., you obviously want them to buy from you because they're already interested in doing so. They just don't know it yet. If someone's searching for your specific product, you obviously want to be the first one they see, the first brand they see, right? So Google ads is just a must-have. And the reason I say implement this in step number 3 is simply because, it's good to have set up some data, have some traffic coming from these markets. Also, maybe you see that, let's say that you test some markets with TikTok and Snapchat, you see that certain locations perform really good, and then you want to implement Google ads on those locations so that you can retarget or at least, show the same products to the people in these markets, so you get the omnipresence effect. So that's why I say Google step number 3, and Meta should be implemented 1 to 2 weeks after Snapchat and TikTok for optimal growth. So you could argue that Meta should be before Google. That's honestly, pretty much up to you. It's not too important with which one you implemented first. They should be implemented, around the same time. But Meta, maybe I should even put Meta before Google simply because Meta is such a strong platform. But the reason that we implemented 1 to 2 weeks after Snapchat and TikTok, as I've written right here, is simply because once we've seen, kind of have some data on what markets have been doing well on Snapchat and TikTok, obviously 1 to 2 weeks is not a lot of time, but we should have some data by then, right? Then we can kind of not only retarget the traffic that we got from Snapchat and TikTok and start to, make those customers buy and stay in front of them and convert them on Meta if they didn't convert through Snapchat and TikTok, but we can also launch ads on those specific markets that we saw do well on TikTok and Snapchat. And the thing with Meta is that sometimes we see that we need to spend a bit more money to start generating sales compared to TikTok and Snapchat, especially when, going into new markets. So that's why we implement Facebook at this step. I would say you could You could actually implement Meta before Google, as I said. It's up to you. But you definitely need to implement Meta pretty damn quickly. You shouldn't wait more than 1 to 2 weeks. And you could even also argue that you should launch Meta the first week. The first week. So that's kind of up to you. But I would just say we usually do that. We usually, start with those platforms and then move on. Then we have Pinterest, and this is mainly for low traffic, for low CPMs, brand awareness, and sales. So Pinterest is just insanely low CPMs, very good for awareness, very good for getting a lot of people on your website, very good for just, tapping into that audience. And the thing with Pinterest is that, there's 15-year-old girls, there's 65-year-old women, there's literally people from every single age bracket, and obviously mostly women, and that is most of our clients sell to women, but we also have some men's fashion brands. But Pinterest is just such a big platform. There's so many people on that platform. There's so many, there's such a broad variety of age groups. So Pinterest is just a must-have. And the reason that I say you should implement this at last is simply because we see that Pinterest takes some time to build up. We don't see instant sales from Pinterest usually when we launch it. It usually takes a bit of time to, get good performance on Pinterest compared to the other platforms, right? So that's why I say Pinterest is more like a sub-platform. Once you have the other ones going, you can start to implement Pinterest, And I'll probably get a lot of people saying, oh, you should get Meta to perform best first. But, each to their own. Sometimes, as I said, something works better than others, and you just got to test for yourself. But this framework is a rough, consolidation of what works. Now, if we move on, I've written here that the reason for using Snapchat and TikTok first is so that they have excuse me, the reason for using Snapchat and TikTok first is that they have low CPMs, which allows us to test a lot for cheap, get a solid amount of traffic from other markets quickly, and then retarget with Meta 7 to 14 days into the process. So this is what I was talking about. When we get a lot of traffic onto a website and they don't buy, they maybe add to cart, they maybe view products, we can then start retargeting them on page views, viewed content, adds to cart, etc. And the chances of them even engaging with our social media is sometimes pretty high. So we can also start to retarget on social media because they go ahead and look us up, right? So this is just a really good way of doing it because all of the traffic that you get, the Meta pixel picks up and then you can retarget it. So you kind of get new markets from other platforms and then you just kind of like put them into Meta. And let's say that you have, campaigns running in let's say, for example, Italy and Germany. And then Meta starts to see a lot of customers coming in from TikTok and Meta that are from Italy and Germany. Then Meta will automatically use the algorithm to see, okay, a lot of customers are coming from these two locations, and then they will start pushing ad spend towards those locations automatically, right? So it's just a funnel that works super well and simply something that really allows you to optimize your ads at a high level because Meta reads that data. And that's why I say retarget with Meta and not Snapchat and TikTok, because the retargeting on Meta is just nothing competes with it compared to that. So that's why we use this framework, and that's why it works super well. Then we have the campaign structure. Now, there's two ways you can go about it, in my opinion. Option one campaign per country, CBO. So this is, a lot of people are preaching this, especially if you go on like social media and Twitter and stuff like that. A lot of people just saying one campaign, one country per campaign, CBO. And some people are saying ABO and da. There's so many people saying so many different things, right? So I would say there's two things, right? This is a very good setup because it's simple. It's very simple and you have a big overview. You'll get a lot of campaigns on your ad account, but it is pretty simple. Now, option two is multiple different campaigns, mix of CBO and ABO and locations. So I'll go into a ad account where it's more of a mixed setup because this kind of, says itself. It's CBO, one per campaign, one country per campaign, right? And so many people, sometimes ABO works for someone and then they will preach that. And then, CBO works for, another party and then they will preach that. So it's honestly whatever works for you. I would say if whatever works for you, we always have a specific way of going about it, but if something is working for you, double down on it. I would say always test out different things and see if you can get something to perform better than the other, but do what works for you currently and don't change up something simply because someone said it online. So that's that. Now here we have a mixed structure. So this is a structure that goes with option two. Advantage Plus campaigns for USA market, ABO for international market. So this is kind of a structure where we are using the CBO, one per country per campaign, but only for the US. The rest is ABO, but for multiple different countries. So this brand is currently generating 630,000 a month, roughly. So we usually see videos performing the best when entering new markets, and that's why videos, in our opinion, is usually just easier to scale, right? Images are sometimes really good, but videos, are sometimes better and easier to scale. So if you go ahead and look here, we say location grouping if you decide to not do one CBO per country. So that's what I say. If you want to do one CBO per country, you should separate groups and regions. If you do not, excuse me, if you do not want to separate each country with CBO, separate groups and regions. So I would say, go ahead and put all Eastern European countries into one ABO, Scandinavian one ABO, German-speaking countries in one ABO, French-speaking countries in one ABO as well. You can do it in ABO or you can do it CBO. So this is kind of a way that allows you to play around with whatever you want. But I would say, regardless whether you go with CBO or ABO, structure the regions. I think that's the best word I had for it, regions, in each campaign or in each ad set. So I would nearly say go with CBO in this case, for example, and then put all Eastern European countries into one CBO, Scandinavia into one CBO, German-speaking countries, French-speaking countries. But once again, as I said, if things are working better for you in ABO, test this out in ABO. Now, mixed best performing countries with testing new ones. Not too much structure, but it can work. So what I mean by this is that, as I said, you can do it like this. That's the two options you have. You can do it like this, separate the regions, and then you can do it like this, and then you just see, okay, we get a lot of orders from Italy, Portugal, and Germany. We put all of those into the same ABO or into the same CBO, and then we just see how it works. So that's kind of the two ways you can go about it, and this structure is actually pretty much built on that, like putting all the best performing countries just into one mix, and then having a few US campaigns on a CBO. So there's not too much structure, and that's the only thing about this, is that sometimes it can be a bit hard for you to read the data, and it can be a bit like overwhelming with the setup simply because you have so many things in the same ad sets, right? So this is mainly, you can see right here, 303 ROAS, 4.7 million Danish kroner. So this is around 630,000, as I said. So it can work. It can work super well, right? And we usually average between 2.3 to 3x ROAS a month on this brand. So it can work if you wanted to, but I usually, for this brand, we just did it simply because we were at their previous data and we saw what had been performing the best, and we launched it and we saw, okay, well, let's try this, and then we did that and then it worked, right? But for most brands, we do the one CBO per country campaign structure, and with exceptions, we do the regions. So sometimes we do one CBO per country, and then we have some CBOs where we do regions if we want to use specific language, etc., etc. So this is just an example. I wanted to show you this because this makes the CBO setup make sense, and this one is a bit more complicated. Now, here the main platforms are Google, Meta, Pinterest. We're using the same structure in Pinterest as on Meta. So in this setup right here, we are using the exact, so this is just the Meta screenshot. We're using the same setup on Pinterest, where we're doing the the mix of countries, mix of campaigns and stuff like that. And some people also like to do campaigns that are just Europe, so they take all of Europe into that account, into that campaign, etc., etc. There's so many different ways of using it, but most people say, and me too, CBO, one CBO per country. So I would say test out what works for you, figure out what's worked for you, and then from there scale and double down on what is working for you from here, as I just said. So take a look at this, and if you want me to send you this kind of framework, I can do that. Shoot me a DM on Instagram and I'll DM this whole setup for you, so you can just sit and scroll through it yourself and maybe make your own version and set it up like that. But I would say start with this. I would nearly always say, as I said, start locally, start locally, go global. Figure out what works on your market, go from there. Now, as I said, you can also just ditch this first setup, ditch this first local to global, and then you can just go ahead and start directly here. And just use the strategy that will work on all of these platforms, and just go globally instantly. We've done that for clients before. We've literally just instantly, from, even if they were at zero sometimes, we've literally just launched them internationally for the first time and then scaled them up from there. So it depends on the business. It depends on what your data you have, what structure you have, who your customers are, etc., etc. And as I said, it's really an individual question. That's why I can't tell you exactly without having a look at everything, and without knowing you and your business, when and how to do it, because it depends on your setup. But this is something that you can work with regardless of what situation is, regardless of what your customer is. When you do decide to scale globally, you can test out these things, see what works for you, and use this as a framework, because it does work, as I just showed you right here with this client. It works. So that's why I'm showing you this. So of course, if you want to scale globally with your fashion brand, shoot me a DM. I'll implement the specific systems. I'll show the specific systems that we use. You can obviously get a feeling of how we do it right here. So if you want to go ahead and implement more platforms, scale your fashion brand to new markets, even if it's just to some countries, it doesn't have to be globally. Shoot us a DM on Instagram or send me an email at elias@fundalmedia.dk, and I'll happy to have a talk with you on how we can do that same thing for you guys, and how we can set it up specifically for your brand. So thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing rest of your week.